Welcome, everybody. Yeah, we had no idea how big the crowd was going to be, so I'd like to welcome our visitors, first time. Glad you're here. We have our people who have been here a few times. Today is a special meeting. This is our Published Authors Forum, and once every 3 or 4 years or so, we've done this, and I think this is the second time, so that's, I guess it's a pattern now. We just want to give people a chance to ask some questions from those of us who've kind of been on the publishing journey, so we'll get started with that. First, I want to introduce the group. Greater Fort Worth Writers has existed for around 15 years or so, and we are mostly a critique group. So we meet here twice a month at the second and last Sundays of each month, our members bring in something to read. Usually they have about 8 minutes to read, and then we have 1 to 2 minutes. We go around and critique each other's writing. We are very much exist for the purpose of being supportive. Supportive for new writers, maybe somebody who got an idea and who's never written anything in their life, but they would like to. Or up to the people who've written double digits books and like to be a part of a supportive group. That was Chrissy.
What? Ken has the same amount.
Chrissy and Kim.
That's right.
So a lot of books among those two. So we support all levels. We want to be supportive. We try not to be nasty and so it can be very hard to share your writing at first when you're a new writer. It was for me. I started in 2013. I guess it was maybe 2012, one of those years. And I had never written anything significant in my life, and they ripped me apart very kindly my first visit here, and it helped me tremendously to get my book to a point where I felt comfortable publishing it. So. Very good group. So what we're going to do today, we're going to go one at a time, and we're going to give you just a brief overview of kind of our own journey to publishing, why we're writing, what's motivated us through, and how we found our way to publishing. And so we're going to start with Chrissy Zarek.
I'm not going to stand. I'm going to do this instead of standing behind the podium because I don't want to. So my name is Chrissy. I write under my initials, C.A. Zarek. I have 11 books out. I have a new one contracted that will be out in September, and I'm working on several other things that will probably be out before then in perfect order. I write different things. I write different subgenres of romance. I write epic fantasy romance. I write historical fantasy romance and romantic suspense. And I have different series going, and it's not hard to keep it straight yet, but it will get to that point. I've been published since 2013. I started my publishing journey since in 2011, I would say. And I am a different case than most of the people. Well, Ken is as well. I'm a hybrid. I have a publisher, and I also self-publish. My publisher is Totally Bound Publishing. They're in the UK. And they do mainly erotic romance, but my stuff isn't really erotic. It kind of rides the line. But I adore them. They do a lot for us as authors. And I also enjoy the control of self-publishing because nobody tells me what to do, when to do it, or how to do it. And I like that a whole lot. I also edit. I'm usually pretty busy with editing. I'm as busy with writing and editing at the same time. I edit for other authors. And that's a different aspect of learning things about yourself and about writing, so it's been really cool for me. I don't really know the answer to why I write, other than the fact that it's always been part of me as a person. I've been writing since I was very, very young, probably 7 or 8 years old. I wrote my first book when I was 14. It will never, ever see the light of day. I wrote one when I was 17, and I actually would like to do something with it. I finished it. It's a teen pregnancy story, and it's like the genuine view of a 17-year-old girl. So I've gone through it a couple times, but it's still a hot mess, but I don't want to edit out the point that it's a 17-year-old girl. Because I wrote it when I was 17, and it's about a 17-year-old girl. So as far as perspective is concerned, I don't want to ruin that. One day I'll get there. One thing I can say about my publishing journey is I used to be with a small publisher that I'm no longer with. And as you go along, you learn things about yourself and your career, and you get the guts to do things that are best for you. And leaving them was best for me, even though it was a hard decision at the time. When you first get a publishing contract, you're like, oh my God, somebody's going to publish my book. This is awesome. And you don't really know, unless you have good friends, which I do. You don't really know what you could walk away from, or what you should walk away from, or how things are supposed to be. And that was my first exposure to publishing, and this particular company didn't really do things the way that they should do things. And I didn't know that until I signed with my second publisher, who's my only publisher right now, to see that they were really unprofessional and I didn't need to be there. So it wasn't the place for me or my books. And that was a really hard call, to walk away from a publishing company. But then I started my journey on self-publishing, and I'm totally no regrets. So that's probably where I'll probably gear my career in the future, is probably stick to self-publishing more than my publisher. I'm not going to leave them. I really do like them, but the money's in self-publishing, honestly. At least my little bit of money. So, but I think that's about it. That's me. And Susie Sheehy is next.
I'm going to stand because I'm short. And we're being recorded. So, I'm Susan Sheehy. I write romantic suspense and contemporary romance. And unlike Chrissy, I am strictly indie published. All 3 of my novels have been with the same publisher, and I've been very happy with them up until now. And other things I'm writing going forward, I'm now confident enough in my writing abilities to try self-publishing if I get a decent editor who'd be willing to back me. I started seriously writing back in 2008, and that's when I joined Greater Fort Worth Writers. I had these characters in my head, I had the story, and I thought it was the best idea in the world, and I wanted to come and share that, and hopefully they would think it was fantastic too. Got ripped to shreds. I remember that. That one's been shoved in a drawer permanently. But the important part was I learned so much about how to write and convey the emotions that were important to me in the right way, to keep a reader engaged in the novel and to keep turning the page. And I would not have learned that without this group right here. Not only just from coming and reading my own pages, but reading other people's stories and seeing where their strengths came from. And they're like, ooh, they did this. I think that's awesome. I should figure out how to do that in my own stuff. For example, dialogue. When I first started out, I had the worst dialogue in the world. It was worse than a Disney movie. Like, itty bitty, like, 4-year-old Disney movies. It was really bad dialogue. I think I've improved a little bit since then. So, I signed with my first publisher on actually my 3rd novel that I ever wrote. And if you're interested in learning about how to get your story out there, so for example, if you have your manuscript ready and you think it's the best you can, and you've had a whole bunch of people look at it and they're like, yeah, sure, go for it. I can help you with the querying process, because I've also made massive mistakes in the querying process. The first novel I queried to a whole bunch of agents and editors. I did probably the most efficient way I could. I went through the entire list of all the publishers and all the agents I wanted to submit to. I had the query letters ready for every single individual person, and I sent them all out on the same week. Sounds like a great idea, right? Get it all out in one fell swoop. No, that was a huge mistake. I found out after bringing the query letter into Greater Fort Worth Writers how awful it was, and unfortunately had turned off all the agents and editors on my story, so I couldn't go back and query it again. Once they come back and reject it, you're not allowed to resubmit it. Not unless you completely rewrite it and rename the title and all that stuff. So I learned the hard way not to do it that way. You have to put your query letter together and you send it out to a whole bunch of agents and editors. Only do like 5 at a time. Wait a few weeks. You should be getting back some nibbles from them, saying, okay, great, this sounds like an awesome idea. Send me the first 3 chapters, or send me the first full manuscript. If you aren't getting any nibbles from anybody, go back and change your query letter. Rewrite it, make sure it's more engaging, more active verbs, and more engaging. Then send it out to your next 5 to 8 people on your list that you want to send it out to. That first novel that I sold took me a year of querying because I found out I had really crappy synopsis. So don't make that same mistake that I did. You'll move a lot faster than I did. And since then, I've sold 2 more novels. I'm about to sell my 4th one, and hopefully get another 2 short stories published in the next year, self-published. So that's me. Next up is Joe Park.
And it's appropriate that I follow Susie because she's pretty much taught me everything I know. She's been fantastic. I am Joe Parr. I write under Joe B. Parr, mainly because whenever I Googled Joe Parr for the first time, it was a death row inmate and the world's leading expert on UFOs. I'm neither of those. And I think the death row inmate, unfortunately, has
That's fast.
he has
He's fulfilled
seen
his,
he's fulfilled his sentence.
But UFOs.
But UFOs are still an option out there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I do write mystery suspense. I've got 3 books, self-published. I guess really from my standpoint, I just kind of evolved from a very avid reader to one day thinking that I was crazy enough to think I could actually write a book, and basically having that conversation with my wife a few times until she finally said, well, why don't you shut up and do it? At which point I was looking at a blank screen going, oh, okay, where do I start? So I wrote what I call my practice book. Very similar to some of the stuff that we've already heard. I wrote a complete novel, 250 pages, 60, 70 chapters, storyline. It was awful, but it all worked. It all tied together. The plot lines came together, and my wife said, hey, you know, this doesn't suck. Which, considering how much my wife reads, this doesn't suck was pretty good. And it was about that time that I got engaged with Fort Worth Writers Group. And much the similar story. It's been a journey of, writing and reading and listening and asking a ton of questions and getting a lot of advice and getting great critiques from the fellow members, and then just kind of walking through it. And as the stories evolve in your head, you just keep going. And it's been an absolute blast. And so that's me. Sorry about that.
I'll introduce myself.
There you go.
My name is Vanessa Foster, and I think I'm the only one here that has a memoir. My book is a true story. You're going to crack up. This is the story about the time I found myself on the run from the FBI. I ended up in Alaska working on a cattle ranch for room and board. And anytime I would meet someone new, and you get to know people, and they'd ask me, so, what's your story, whatever. I would tell them the story, and their mouths would jump open, and everybody kept telling me, you need to write a book. So, 5 years after the events that happened in this book were over with, I sat down and started writing. 20 years later, I had my finished manuscript, and mainly it took that long because I was a single parent, and I was working full-time, and when do you write? In the middle of the night, Saturday afternoon. So it took me that long to get the story out, and then I queried 3 literary agents. Only one of them responded to me, and she had wonderful things to say about my writing. And then her next sentence was, but memoirs are really tough to sell, especially, I don't think she used this word, but especially if you're nobody. You have a very engaging story, but I can't sell it because nobody knows who you are. So self-publishing was pretty much my only option, and at the time, I had friends and family and acquaintances and coworkers and everybody eager to read this book. So I thought, well, I can't print 100 copies and give them to everybody, so I'll just go ahead and self-publish. And it was quite a journey. It took me probably 3 months of researching and looking online. I finally settled for Amazon, mainly because there was no upfront cost. Create space through Amazon. I got my ebook up and running, and then it took me another month to figure out how to format it to fit into a paperback. My geek of a husband helped with that. I will say, if your book has photographs like mine does, it's harder. It's much harder. And I have 7 or 8 photos in here. But I probably spent 2 or 3 days trying to talk myself into leaving the photos out. But they kind of help the story. It kind of brings it to life. And I know that when I read a lot of memoirs, and when I read one, I love it when there's pictures in there that takes me to where they were. So that's my story. I am working on my first novel, fiction piece, and I do not know how I ever wrote anything without this group bringing in a chapter, letting them critique it, helping me so much, because I didn't really know what I was doing, and I'm just now learning. But yeah, that's it. I hope to see you guys start coming to our group. It's really awesome. It'll help you a lot. Next up, we have Ken Engel.
My name is Ken Engel. I have 11 books published, 1 anthology, 1 poem, and 7 books that are on audio, and 3 waiting to be published. I'm 82 years old, and I started publishing or writing when I was 69. And I have 1 passion and 2 vices. My passion is writing, and my vices are my pipe and women. And I make no apologies for any of them. I had call a company with whom I do some business once every year or so. And you know the routine, you go through name, address, account number, and then silence. Absolute silence. The woman said, "Are you an author?" Well, she just made my day. I said, "Yes." She said, "You wouldn't be the kind of thing who wrote Who Killed the Killer, would you?" Now listen, my world had come full circle. That's the one thing that every author hopes to have happen, and it happened to me. And I make no apologies for it. I thought I was on cloud 9. I was in business. I did not have time to write, run the business, and trying to put kids through college. And then my broker spent 9 years in prison stealing all of his clients' money. And I was 69 at the time, and I just thought, there's no sense in me going back and trying to make that money back. To hell with it. I'd always wanted to write, so I started writing. And that's what I've done ever since. One of the things that I want to touch base with you on about writing is, as a writer, we never know what the experiences of our customer, our reader, is going to be. They're all different. Every one of your experiences are different than the others. I had one book, Queen's Best. And I had one character in there that was only 6 lines of description on her, and then mentioned about a dozen times through a 300-page book. And yet she was the one they remembered. I want to read you what I wrote about her. Taking a few minutes with grenadiers, Colonel Byerly injected some personal touch to their conversations. And then there was Masorda Olivia Mazzaroni, known as Ollie, to the few she let that close. What are you up to, lady? What are you hiding from me? Ollie sat on the deck to one side. She seldom mixed with the others. But to a person, the grenadiers would go into combat with her at their side any day. If anyone personified a warrior, it was this woman. One minute she could kill a dozen enemies, never wavering, and the next cuddle a dying comrade, weeping. It's mine, Colonel, something I take into battle with me, and no one's ever seen it. Her voice was a blend of little girl and grown-up determination. And you want to keep it that way? Yes. Her answer again was childlike, even a bit whimsical. That's the character they remembered out of at least 20 characters in the book, and as I said, she only got 6 lines of description. So you never know what you're dealing with your readers. And that's part of the battle that you fight. You have somebody come up to you and say, oh, that scene, and they start to tell you the scene, and your eyes want to roll in the back of your head because that's not what you wanted them to come out of the scene with anyhow. But it does happen. That's part of the problem that we get into in writing. That we make the mistake of believing that everybody sees everything that we see. And that ain't the way it is. And you will find that common ground as you go down through your writing. That's it. Thanks, man.
No problem.
Chris?
Hi again. I'll be a little bit different. I'll start a little bit earlier than anybody else had. As a kid, fairly young kid, I read from an early age, and I always wanted to write. By the time I hit high school, I also loved computers. And by the time I hit high school and college and deciding what I needed to do, one of the options was a little more lucrative than the other. So I went that route. But I had a great career. I was very good at what I did. I loved what I did. And for 25 years, I worked for a lot of great companies and done a lot of great technology stuff. But there was always something inside me that was just kind of missing, and it's this creative thing. And so I found, as I got married, had young kids, I never had any time, but I always had these stories kind of burning inside me. And every once in a while, I'd sit down and I'd try to write, and it would be the most awful stuff that you've ever read in your life. And it really every time it discouraged me, because I was like, I can't do this. I stopped reading for a while, and finally decided, well, maybe I need to read more. So I picked up a book, and I said, okay, I'll read this, and this will tell me, what it takes to be a writer. And I happened to pick up A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. And if you've read that, it is so complex, the writing is so beautiful. I was like, oh my, I can't do this. And then I started reading other stuff in the genre, and I said, well, I can do that. But what really got me going, what finally got me going, I was always somebody, I started things and I never finished them. In 2008, I should have brought the prop. In 2008, I started running. I had young kids and I'd gained a lot of weight, more weight than I'd ever had in my life. And so I started running, and eventually my brother and I said, why don't we do some half marathons? So we signed up in 2008 for the Cowtown Half Marathon in Fort Worth. And we finished it, and it felt awesome, and it's like, well, that's over. But they put this medal around my neck, and it was like a little triangle. And they said, hey, if you come 4 more years, you can get a plaque, and these will fit all together. It'll be a great accomplishment. So my brother, we're feeling all pumped up from this whole thing, and said, yes, we're going to do it. So we committed and said, we're going to do this for 4 more years, finish this thing out. And I had no idea how hard that was going to be, because I'm awful at exercise. I'm like the person, I exercise really hard for a month and then fall off for a month and then, wait till next year. But I had to keep it up. I had to keep up my fitness and keep running for such a long time that by the time I finished that 5th one, I knew 2 things. I mean, the one thing, I knew that I could finish stuff, that I could commit to something over a long term and I could do it. And the second thing I knew is I didn't want to run anymore because I was sick and tired of long distance running. So I decided, well, maybe I should write that book. And that's when I actually sat down, and it was really, really hard for a long time. The words, it is so hard to get those thoughts onto that page. But I had an idea, and it was 1994 or 5 when I first had this kind of spark of an idea. And it had stayed, unlike most of my other ideas, which were really bad and I threw away after a while, this idea just stuck with me over and over again for years. And finally, I said, I'm going to write that idea down. And I worked on it a bit more, and it's like the story just kind of fell out of the air. And it almost fully formed in my mind. And so I started writing it, and I didn't come to this group until I'd actually finished the first manuscript. And it was bad. I mean, it was not a good manuscript. It wasn't really well written. It had a lot of, but it was a good story. But it was a good story. The group, I came in, like I mentioned earlier, I came in and I had this awful little info dump of a first chapter, and everybody just kind of looked, and I've learned exactly what that look is. It's like, okay, you're making the same mistake everybody else does, so here's how you fix it. And by listening to, the 3 of these writers were here when I started, by listening to them and others, it really helped motivate me. It helped me consistently learn to get to the point where I was able to finish my first book, which is there, The Tuning Station. And I've just finished my second, I've got it ready for beta at this point. Just finding that motivation to write is hard, because it is hard work. It's a lot of work, it takes time, and you're taking something that is very personal for you, and that book was very personal, and you're showing it to people, and there is a lot of terror involved in that, opening your soul up for other people to look at. So really overcoming that fear, the joy of having it done is just awesome. Now, as far as my publishing journey with this book, when I finished it, I started submitting it to agents and to publishers, and I actually got some bites. I got some interest and kind of some, it doesn't fit in a really close genre. It's kind of too Christian for a lot of publishers and not Christian enough for Christian publishers. It doesn't really follow the rules that the Christian genre likes, so it was kind of a hard place. I did find a publisher who said, oh, we want to publish this. And I studied the contract, and as I was reading it, there's all this excitement. It's like somebody has acknowledged me, somebody said, I want to put your book in print. There was that excitement, but as I kept reading through the contract over and over again, I kept thinking, well, they have the right to change this. These things that were really important to me, why I wrote this book, they could change them. So I contacted them back and said, I'd love for you to publish my book, but with these guidelines. And I said, these are you can't change the end, and you can't change this other part. And they came back to me and said, no, we can't do that. We would need those changed. And it's heartbreaking. But on the other hand, I'm a highly technical person, so self-publishing, learning the process wasn't that difficult for me. So I've self-published the book. It's met with not great success yet. I'm still looking for my audience. Marketing is something that even if you get published, it's something that you're responsible for as an author. My next book, that's actually completely different than any other book I ever want to write. I'm more of a science fiction, and so I've got a young adult science fiction fantasy type book that will be my next book, and that's probably where my career is going to go. But I'll always love that book because it's the thing that got me writing. And I know, when you write that first book, you'll know. you know, you can rough it out, you can publish it, and it may be a pain to you after that, but for me, it was a revelation. It's like something that was missing, some type of creativity, some type of just getting myself out into the world. I found that I used to get through programming, but I really don't get it anymore. I get it from writing, and it is the most incredible feeling. If that is your path, then it is definitely worth the pain yeah, there will be pain. It's definitely worth the pain, humiliation, and frustration that will come. So with that, I guess we're done. We're going to open it up for questions. You can feel free to ask any of us individually or just ask the group, and we'd love to share what knowledge we have with you.
For each of you, you all look like normal people. Generally speaking,
I make no promises.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Okay. So do you have special education? Do you have to sit down and like, I'm gonna go study English literature or?
I don't.
How many of us have an English degree?
I have a bachelor's degree, but it's certainly not English.
Yeah, what are your degrees in?
Mine's criminal justice.
Mine's communication and sociology.
I'm a business major.
Mine's a life apart, the
Hard knocks.
hard knocks.
University of Hard Knocks.
Yes, that's
There you
it.
Engineering.
Wow.
Yeah, I would tell you
Wow.
that truly from an education standpoint, I mean, growing up, I was barely a reader, much less a writer. I became a reader as an adult because I traveled so much in my job, and I was on airplanes and in hotels and stuff like that. So I got to a point where I, always had a book with me just to keep myself entertained. And then somewhere along the way, I switched from nonfiction to fiction, and then got very passionate about that. But no, the true education that I've gotten from a writing standpoint has been from these books right up here, and just writing and having it critiqued and understanding it. And, yeah.
And even though our degrees aren't necessarily in creative writing or fiction writing, I cannot stress enough the amount of self-help books we have read on certain topics of life. And it's crazy how many books out there. There's one on dialogue, there's one on action scenes, there's one on horror, goal, motivation, conflict. That's probably the top one up there.
That one's the
And
best
if
one,
you're not
yeah,
into
if you're
reading
starting
books, there's websites on everything.
Yeah.
I would add to that, them that can't, or can do, and them that can't, to write books on how to do it.
Yeah, there you go.
To a large extent, you should.
Yeah. I mean, I think I grew up being a reader, so I've been reading as long as I've been writing. So I think that's got a lot to do with it, too.
I had an experience in college that really set the stage for me. My first semester in English Lit, I aced. Man, that was just like greasing the skids. In my second semester, by the third week, I was in remedial English. It turns out that the school had a fight going on over commas.
There's still a fight going on over.
I was going to say,
Always.
And one group said that you put commas here, here, and here, and that's it. The other group was you put them here, 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 and where it adds clarity.
Yeah.
there
In
you
their
go.
opinion, okay? And these people were at war. Well, my first semester, I had the one that here, is where it adds clarity. The second semester, here. And I went into remedial English.
Wow.
And, I mean, this was a real eye-opener for me. And I still have problems with commas. My publisher is constantly telling, well, I'll have the book ready in a couple of days, I'm still correcting your comma faults.
Yeah.
I hear this on every book from this guy.
I've never met a comma I don't like.
Yeah, well, I feel the same way, but even my son says, Dad, I don't understand your comma.
We usually
Every
don't talk
editor is
religion in the
different.
group, by the way, so.
Every editor is
But
different.
it just points out that you will have a style, and if you're selling 10, 12 million books a year, you can write the damn thing any way you want.
Exactly, upside down and backwards.
And it won't make any difference at
Yeah.
all. But that's the threshold you have to get to.
Yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, the way I've always looked at it is, you know, find a book or an author
That
that
you like.
you really love, that you read and say, wow, that's well done.
Mhm.
And just immerse yourself in that book, read it multiple times, make notes on what they did, how they did it, why they did it, etc. And then, you know, think of your scenes and your story and try to work it into that mode. And
Good advice. I heartily
good.
recommend that.
Definitely. And
One
I'll
of your
add,
favorite authors.
yeah,
And you like
definitely.
them.
I'll add one last thing. I think it's an advantage. I mean, not everybody's going to be Stephen King, who's always writing about writers. You know, we all have different perspectives on our life. You know, based on what you learn in your job, what you learn in your life, that's what plays into writing. And honestly, I believe that's more important than the raw writing, because you can learn the writing skills, you know, and then you can have a good editor go and help roughen the edges, you know, from your stuff. But nobody is going to go and give you those life experiences that it takes to write a really good book. So.
And then if you're gonna write about something you don't know about, don't do it when you first start, please. Right, you know, learn how to do research and don't get sucked into a research hole, because you will. I spent 2.5 hours on the internet looking for 17th century underwear one time. I can't ever get that time back. And it was one
I
stinking.
don't need to see your search history.
And it was one line in the book. It was one line in the book. So did it matter in the scheme of things? Absolutely not. So just be careful when you do research.
Well, sometimes, you know, some of the books, there are two books that come to mind that were written in panic. And that's The Christmas Carol and The Old Man in the Sea. In the second book, the author had been, had his last book rejected. That's mine.
Oh, it's yours?
Yeah. I know who it is. She won't leave me alone.
Yeah.
His book had been rejected, and the guy had 6 weeks in which to write that book, or his publisher was going to sue him.
Yeah, breach of contract.
Because they'd already paid for the book.
Motivation.
And it was written in 6 weeks. The Christmas Carol was written almost the same way. It went, the guy actually went out into the country and walked. And walked and walked and thought that through. And finally he had the book in his mind and came back and wrote it. And every creditor in Old England was after him. I mean, the guy Dickens was in real trouble financially. And he was headed for the, back then, the poor farm, or what they, where they locked the poor in the prison if they couldn't pay their bills. And he just missed that by a short time. So, you know, you never know where your motivation's going to come from.
That's true. Some of the best stuff I've written is written under extreme stress.
Well, my publisher, for example, didn't like one section of Second Contact, and he sent me a 3-page email telling me how he wanted to change. I sent him back a 1-word email saying no. And he sent me back, well, maybe you ought to find another publisher.
No.
And it turns out that I had a pacifist president, and she was trying to cut down the military, and she got booted out of office. Well, it turns out he's a pacifist that hates the military.
Oh, there you go.
Ooh, there you go.
Personal stuff does affect.
Yeah.
And he did not want to see that in print.
Hmm.
So he and I,
There she is again. I need your
She's
black book.
persistent.
Okay. All right, we can go ahead and take the next question. Who's going?
so anyhow, motivation is a great thing. I'm still looking for another publisher. But once you get up to a point, like I had 9 books with my publisher at that time, it's hard to get another publisher to pick you up. Almost impossible. I'm having a hell of a time finding another publisher. But I have a contract with a current one. That's the reason he's still publishing my work. We have I signed a 15-book contract with him, and I've only published 11, so, you know.
Wow, that's optimistic.
15.
That's awesome. That's optimistic, that's awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
What's that?
a 15-book
Oh.
contract?
Well,
That's great.
Is there any more questions?
Questions?
I wrote it down a lot,
Well, go for it.
Go for it.
So, how do you know when to start? You know, I mean, like, you know, I have like a lot of ideas. So how do you, especially you're Susan?
Yes.
So, like, for example, you know, when you write your romance novels, how long do you take to actually come up with that concept and go, okay, now I'm ready to start, you know, writing?
That's a very good question, and that actually comes down to the very big difference between people who outline, plot, and people who pants it. I am an avid plotter. Some other people up here are avid pantsers.
I sit down and write.
She
And just see
writes
where it goes.
All that planning crap doesn't do anything for me.
Oh.
Write the
Some
book.
people, when you outline and plot it out and you know every in and out of everything that's going to happen, make some people crawl up into the fetal position.
It's like too much foreplay. Really is. I'm just saying.
But I'm the way where if I don't have a place, if I don't have at least the main parts scheduled out, like the beginning and I know the ending and I know the main things that have to happen, I can't even write the first page. It drives me crazy.
And
I
I'm
literally
the
write
opposite.
myself into corners and I have to backtrack and cut 20,000 words and then that's when I go to the fetal position. So I would say, even though as I'm writing a story, I'm already plotting other characters and other stories as I'm writing something else. And I'll have other characters and other scenes swirling around in my head for up to a year before I just physically have the time to get to it.
And I think, what I was gonna say is how do you start? I was gonna tell you, you can't edit a blank page, so just start. Well, you may not know if you're a pantser or a plotter yet. Seriously, plotting puts me in the fetal position. I can't do it. It makes me not want to write the book. And I spent the better part of 2014. Everybody kept telling me, you keep selling books, you need to be a plotter, you need to be a plotter. And then finally one of my friends, one of my real good friends said, did you ever think that maybe the way you're doing it's not wrong? And I went, no, I never thought that. People are telling me these things. And so I wasted my time because I can't plot. Now I am an audible plotter, so there are a lot of times where I will call Susie especially and say, hey, do you have a minute to listen to this and tell me if it sounds like crap? And so the further I go, the more I write. I usually do know things now. It's not like, oh, there's these two people and by the end of the book they're gonna end up together. I usually know more than that. So, but it's stylistic and it's your process. Now, most books are different for me. Like the one I'm writing right now, I'm writing it chronologically. I never do that. I never write chronologically, and that would put her in the fetal position. She's got to write chronologically. I keep, but the one I'm writing right now, so far, I'm on the 8th chapter. I'm writing it chronologically. Weird for me. Normally, if a scene occurs to me, pops into my head, I'll be reading what I wrote yesterday or whatever, and then I'll go, oh, light bulb! Scroll down, and then I'll just go to town on a scene that probably it will just not, who knows where it's gonna end up, but I need to get it out of my head. So, that's how I am, but I really couldn't plot. I mean, I don't do bullet points on a Word doc is the most I've ever considered plotting, and most of the time I don't do that. I'll jot down notes, you know, he does this, and he does this, and she does this for work, and that, and sometimes I know their names, and sometimes I don't, and I usually know their job, but other than that, I don't know.
Chris, what you think?
Well,
I've only finished one book where I knew what the end was going to be when I started, and that was my mystery. Anything else, I just sit down and let the story take me where I'm going.
Yep.
right. I'm more of a plotter. I will say that there is kind of a sense, whether you're a plotter or a pantser, the things that make a story work are really the same. You know, you're going to flow, you're going to have an introduction period, you're going to have what they call the first plot point, which is kind of where everything gets set in motion, and then you're going to have a pivot point where things kind of change, and your midpoint, and what they call the second plot point, which is where kind of everything changes again to kind of move to the conclusion. So pantsers typically know this intrinsically. The really good pantsers know this whole structure, and so and a lot of that is with experience. I think that the downside to being a pantser is you might write a whole lot of stuff that doesn't make the light of day. In my first book as a plotter, I only wrote one chapter that I had to rewrite. My current book, every chapter is going in. So it's not, it's more efficient, I think, to be a plotter. And for somebody like me who doesn't have a great deal of
No, it's not more.
Well,
It's
it
a
is-
waste of time.
it is.
You gotta write a book.
It is for me. But the problem with being a plotter is you don't know what's coming. You can plot everything out perfectly, but as you're writing it, you start writing a chapter and you're gonna say, wow, this whole thing has this chapter didn't go the way I thought it was going to. And then you read it back and it's like, it makes no sense because you're finally thinking of things in real time.
Yeah.
And so I use something called, it's really a loose plotting. I will plot like maybe the next 3 chapters very specifically. So I know exactly what's coming. And then the farther out I go, the more ambiguous I am. Now I know the ending. I pretty much know the ending of everything I've written so far. So it's really a question of getting there. But it's up to you. But the one thing I was going to say before I went off into that is it's important to finish the book. Finishing the book is incredibly important. And you will.
To stop.
Yeah, well, it's like writing your manuscript. You gotta get to the point where it's good. I've started it and I've ended it. I've written the end and everything in between. In my last book, I was a lot more, it didn't fall out like my first book did. And so I've got problems in the first few chapters and I'm writing on and I'm making decisions that completely invalidate that stuff. But I keep pushing myself on because I know if I keep going back and changing, I'm never gonna finish. So I go off and finish it. And by the time I reach the end, I know what the story is. And so then you go through the revision phase. And that's another thing that seems kind of daunting because the revision phase can take longer than the original writing phase, it can. It's not if you're a perfect writer, like some of us, but for me it does. So it's just something to consider. You just start writing and you can change anything. It's your world, your story.
You don't write it, you can't change it,
Yeah.
basically. One thing I was gonna play off something Chris said, when you sit down to write, if you decide that you're gonna be a pantser, one thing I do that helps me tremendously, and I also agree with him that you get it as you go. Because my first book, I've always been a pantser. There's lots of stuff in there that was like, no, that's stupid. I don't do that anymore. Because when I sit down, I go, what is the point of this scene? Every scene has to have a point. You want to get into the scene as late as you possibly can. You want to get out of the scene as soon as you possibly can. So those are some things that were told to me by a great writer, and it has helped me tremendously. So I don't, like he said, it is experience, because now I can pants a book like, I've written 18,000 words in the last 2 weeks. And I haven't done that in a really long time, so it feels awesome. But, I know where the story is going. This one's an oddball for me because it can be fully formed. Usually I have to fight for it. So, it's just like, it's get in, get out, get in and get out, get in and get out, because you don't want to bore your reader. So make sure that, this is really intimidating. I know this, what I'm about to say. Every word has to count, every paragraph has to count, every page has to count. And so if you think about those things in those terms, you won't write extra words. You'll get to the point where you won't write extra words. It's not going to happen at the first time. It's not going to, because you can't come out perfect. You got to learn how to walk, so to speak.
It is one of the first lessons I ever learned, is in fiction writing, take a scene, say you wrote 100 words. Every editor is going to come back to you and say, cut it in half, 50 words, and don't lose any of the information you're providing. You have to keep all the character names, you have to keep the plot, you have to keep the characterization, you've got to keep the setting. But cut the word count in half. And
Say it
first
less
time I
words.
saw that, I
Yeah.
like jaws on the floor and I want to throw up. And I'm like, I can't lose any of these words.
I know, that is hard, that is hard.
Yeah.
I'm a very methodical guy, so my background is IT project management, working on, 3,000 line project plans and stuff like that, and every day is a step, and okay, check that thing off, right? So clearly I'm a plotter. But I'm also a plotter from a standpoint that all of my books have an overarching theme. And so even though they're mystery suspense and they're, cop dramas, they have, there is something, there's like a social topic built into each one of the books. And so I start from there before any of the story starts. So I start from there, make sure I understand in my head what that theme is going to be and how I want to, come at that theme. And And I'll spend weeks or months just literally just writing stream of consciousness.
Every single day?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it could be anywhere, you know, on airplanes, in hotels, wherever. Just stream of consciousness stuff. I can foresee a scene that shows this. Here's some dialogue that I can hear in my head. You know, here's some plot points and some twist points and some things I want to hit. And here's statistics I want to cover. And that can go on for weeks or months until finally I get, you know, 10, 12, 15 pages of just randomness. And then I finally get to a point, okay, I think I got some meat on the bone. And then I go, you know, much like Chris said, let me outline the first 5 chapters pretty detailed and the next 10 very high level. And I'll get into a chapter and it just takes a life of its own at that point. You know, I know where I want to go with it, but each chapter, so in my books, I can tell chapters from different points of views within the cast of characters. And so sometimes I'll think, oh, I need to have these 10 things happen in this chapter. And then I figure out, oh, I've got to tell it from this particular point of view, and then I realize, oh, this guy would never do that. That's not part of his personality. And so then all of a sudden, those 10 things turn into 8 things or 12 things, and stuff gets pulled in and pushed out. And so as much as you plot and as much as you outline, the story drives itself ultimately.
Absolutely.
But at least it gives me a structure that I can work from, and gives me the ability to go, okay, I know where I think I'm heading. I never know the end.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I usually figure out the end of the book around chapter 30. It's like, okay, now I know where I'm going now. Let me go.
I'm kind of new to the whole fiction game, but I knew in the story I'm writing right now that my bad guy was in trouble with the law or something, and that's what brought him to town, and I would figure that out later. And so, 20,000 words later, I had a dream over the weekend, and there's my answer. So
Yeah.
it wasn't,
Actually, really
I had a dream. That's how my ideas come to me. I wake up in the middle of the night.
Long showers and dreams.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Showers too. I always have a light bulb in the shower, seriously.
Yeah.
Well,
I
So
don't-
I'm kind of
Commute
hybrid.
time.
Yeah.
I'm a pantser that plots minimally.
Mhm.
I have the last page of my manuscript, I have some bullet points, and this will happen, and this will happen. And it's not details, it's just kind of a big picture. And that's what's working for me.
I had a chance to attend a session with the chief editor of Penguin. Penguin's 365 or thereabout companies. And at the corporate level, they have one person responsible for each action that goes on below. And this woman was the chief editor. And strikingly beautiful, blonde woman. But she had a voice like this, boy. And I mean, she attracted your attention. But someone asked her, what is the biggest reason people do not get published? She said, character and scene development. It's that simple. If you don't do character and scene development, you ain't gonna get published. And yet, if you're like most of us, when you see that in the book, you kind of
Yeah.
go past it like this. But you're not gonna get the big boys to publish you without it. And if you want something to refer to, go in and Google David Poyer and he has some excellent work on character and scene development, and I heartily recommend it. The
How do you
name's
spell the last name?
Poyer, P-O-Y-E-R, David Poyer. A lot of times scene development can give you action to work on later on. Kind of builds on itself. You know, you start building character and scene. Just think of it as somebody handed you a 35 millimeter clip film, one clip, and you've got to bring your reader into it. You've got to tell them what's in there, what's happening. I had one guy in this one chapter, and he was on chapter 21. This was a critique. And I said, you know, some things about it. And he said, well, I covered that in chapter 2. You didn't. You know, for example, when the guy opened the door, when he knocked on the door, what happened? Was he in there in a suit? Did he have his tie on? When the guy opened the door, did the guy rebel and look back, or did he welcome him in? Did the guy have his suit coat on? Was his tie on and crooked? Was he drunk? When he walked into the room, there were 5 people there. Did they look away, or did they look toward him and smile? You know, he had 2 or 3 pages there just on walking into the room that would have brought us into the scene. He didn't do it because he had described that hotel room once before in chapter 2. He missed the whole reason behind what character and scene development are. This lady back here does a fantastic job of integrating her character and scene development into her work, and it just flows. You know, it's just, I'm jealous. Envious.
Vanessa, I wanted to ask you, because
Pardon?
I wanted to ask Vanessa,
Oh,
I wanted to ask her, she wrote memoirs, so is that in some way easier? I know you said it took you 20 years to write it, but.
Writing this book was my therapy. It was very cathartic. So that was another part of why it took me so long, because I would get to a tough part to write and I'd put it down and I'll deal with that later, pick it up later. But, I'm sorry, what was the question?
I was wondering, is it easier to
Oh,
write
well,
nonfiction?
I think maybe a little bit because I knew the story.
So you knew the story.
I knew the story, and I knew where I wanted to start and where I wanted to finish, and I knew what happened.
Yeah.
So, you know, that, I didn't have to create characters,
Make stuff up.
make anything up. It all happened. So, in writing this fiction, I think that is just learning how to write and create a scene, create the characters, and then do the dialogue. There's mechanics there that I didn't know about when I wrote mine. I've written actually 2 memoirs. This is the first one. The second one hasn't been published.
Actually, I have a question. Is there, how many people here actually have close to at least a full finished manuscript and they're more curious about, the afterwards, the querying and the publishing and the contracts?
I do have a question though. Y'all know that I haven't been writing here lately. And I'm like 5 chapters away from finishing my last book. So if I start reading from the beginning, I get stuck into editing and I never get back to the end to get, so should I just jump back in and try to remember everything I've written before now, or?
I would say if you've had a pretty long break away, and I know you have, I would at least go back and reread through it, but keep your pen down.
Here's a suggestion plan on that. Put it on something else. Can you make it a PDF and put it on
my Kindle.
Yeah, put it on your Kindle, then you can't mess with it.
Maybe
I
just
get
write
into the
notes if I
same-
notice something.
Yes,
but-
exactly, like if you type on page 6.
Like my editorial internship, it was the same thing
Yeah.
I was doing with that.
That'll help you see it in a different light. So, and maybe you'll read it faster too. And then you can just jump and finish those 5 chapters. I would just want to finish.
That's the main reason I haven't jumped back in yet, because it's just.
It's
you know.
overwhelming. Because you stepped away for a long time, you get really unplugged. I do that too. And when I switch series, like say I just finished a book, I just recently finished a book that's related to my fantasy series, so I haven't touched it in a long time. So before I go back to write the next book, I'm going to have to do some reading because I won't remember where I was at. And I don't remember what my voice was like in the last book, that kind of thing. So you have to do some reading, but I would say get away from it. Put it on something else so you cannot touch it. Because I do the same thing. When I'm in my editing process, I will stare at a paragraph for 30 minutes. It's a big waste of time.
And then I just like.
Get away.
Yeah. It's the middle of the book.
Right. Or you don't retain what you read. So that's not helping you at all because you're trying to refamiliarize yourself with it. So yeah, just
Or there's
put
a
it
point, go back and read it, but only from the middle.
Yeah, you can do
Just
that
to get
too.
yourself back into the story.
If you're pretty sure about where it started and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know the beginning really good because I've probably edited that like 50 times.
Exactly. Yeah, so yeah. If you feel you need to read the whole thing, go for it. But if you feel you can get away with like chapter 20, then start there. So.
set your priorities so that finishing it is like the most important thing you need to do right now. It's more important than editing, more important than, that word or that inconsistency, of. That's the most important thing right
The
now.
end,
So,
Does it
yeah.
help to set a deadline for yourself?
yes.
You know what helps me is thinking in terms of smaller chunks. How many words did I write today? And I literally keep track. I have a little spreadsheet, how many words did I write today for this particular book, right? How many chapters, how, do I want to get 2 chapters done this week or 1 chapter done this week or whatever? Just take, eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? I want to get a page done today.
That's project
Right.
management.
It is. I break everything down into
Right.
the smallest little thing, and I can write 100 words today.
Yeah.
I don't care
Yeah.
what's going on, I can write 100 words today. Maybe not 101, but I can write 100. And you know what? To Chrissy's point, you get that first 100 and your fingers are moving, and the next thing you know, you've written 1,000. And the next thing you know, you stayed up half the night and something really sparked, and boom, you've got 5 chapters written. It happens, but you've got to force yourself sometimes to just go, all right, today I'm writing 100 words.
It's a job, remember that, it's a job, really, that's how I think of it. I write 7,000 words a week, so if I can do 1,000 words a day, I don't feel like the loser at the end of the week. And last week I wrote 8,400, and I was
Yeah.
so
That's
proud of myself,
fantastic.
like I was so proud of
How many
myself.
hours do you sit down?
I have never been
It takes me
that
about
regimented
45
in
minutes to
my
write
writing.
1,000 words. An hour, 2 hours, 2 hours most. And what I usually do is right when I sit down at the computer, I edit too, so as long as I edit for my client first, because I work way better for other people than I do work for myself, which is a problem actually. As long as I edit first, then I get to go to town on writing, and I usually write about 2 hours a day, and it just depends. Last night I wrote 1,403 in about 2 hours. It just depends. As long as I hit my 1,000, I'm allowed to stop. Yes.
I've
Sometimes
never
I
been
do
that
2,200.
regimented in my writing, and I'm not sure that I would want to be. In fact, I know I wouldn't want to be. It's just, you sit down and do what you want to do, and when you're done, you get up and go do something else. That's all that regimentation and writing down in that spreadsheet, man, that would drive me.
Yeah, I understand.
How about you, Vanessa?
That's for sure.
Do you have a system?
No, I don't really have a system. Writing is what I'm going to do in my retirement. And at that time, I think I will probably look at it as a job and write from, I write on the weekends, and I usually get going around 10 a.m. I'm not a morning person. I'll have a slow, easy morning, and then I'll be ready to get in there and write. And then I get lost in time, just stand still, and it's the most wonderful feeling in the world to just kind of be in that bubble and write. And I'll usually come out of my office around 3 or 4 and have written whatever I've written, and I was in that wonderful special place during that time, and it is what it is. Sometimes, that's a whole chapter, maybe it's 2 or 3 chapters, maybe it's just a small scene, but, so I'm probably going to be easy on myself, but look at it as a job too, but an easy part-time job.
So Susie has 2 little boys, so she's got the other distractions. So how do you do it?
I do have a deadline. It is 1:45 p.m. every day. Actually, 3 children. But I have to go pick my son up from school every day, and he has to go to his ABA therapy every day. He has autism, so he's got literally a therapy session of some kind every day. And that's my first job, first and foremost, and that always comes first. And I have about 3 to 4 hours, 3 to 4 mornings a week that I have to write. And I don't get any other time outside of that, because I've learned I cannot write when my children are in the house. My mind will never focus. So my deadline is 1:45 every day. And as soon as that 1:45 comes around, I gotta get my butt in the car and go get my son. So I literally have to cram as much as I can into that time, because that's my therapy, that's my stress relief. So I have to get as much of it in as I can.
Or she'd be insane.
Yeah. So,
So is this, so it doesn't sound like either of you are doing this actually for the money. It's more of a
No.
passion.
No, there's
If
not.
you're,
If
make
you're
money, is it
interested in making money right off the bat, this is
Not,
No.
just the doors over there.
Don't you realize that J.K. Rowling and James Patterson, those are like the exceptions to
Yeah.
the rule?
And it's
Yeah, they are.
90% of authors out there have to have another job of some kind to help support them.
Yeah, there's a small percentage that can make a living doing it.
I wanna say,
More
like,
power to them. It's a part-time thing for me. It's very much like they talk about, it's a therapeutic thing. It's a way to have a creative outlet that my work in the rest of the world doesn't really allow. Yeah, someday I would love to retire and sit with a big margarita and my laptop.
You said nothing about drinking.
I'll have a margarita.
I'm teasing.
But yeah, I mean, and you know, the self-publishing aspect of it helps you to actually, you know, be in the black as opposed to the red, if you don't actually
Yes.
count your time.
if you don't actually like,
You don't
spend
count
money.
your time. You know, so I mean, it's a great, wonderful outlet, and someday I hope it's a retirement vocation.
If you study the authors who do make, and especially these days, self-publishers tend to be making more money than traditionally published authors. If you look over the average and kind of eliminate the James Pattersons, the Stephen Kings,
No,
really self-published authors are making more money these days than just your person who's published by the random author. Because but it really comes, the way to do that is to publish a lot of books. You have people who are publishing like a book every couple months. I mean, seriously, you have some authors who are just shooting stuff out as quickly as they can, editing it, tossing it out there, building series. But the more stuff you have out there, apparently I've only got one thing out there, so
Yeah.
I don't know this.
Yeah.
What they say is to be successful, and it's very daunting, and unless you're sitting in the chair and you have time and money and you're rich and you can, unless your husband has a really, really good job, generally they say 6 to 8 weeks you need a release, every 6 to 8 weeks. And the authors who are making money that are doing that are having a release every 6 to 8 weeks. But the thing about self-publishing is it's not a cure-all. You're not going to make $1 million. So the average I think the average author, not even self-published author, but the average author makes $10,000 a year. That's middle of the line. I honestly have not hit $10,000, and I have 11 books out. I wish I could say I had, but I haven't yet. But the thing is, the people who have over $1 million, who make over $1 million a year, hit self-publishing in 2011 when everyone said that's stupid and you're not going to make any money. Right now the market is extremely, extremely saturated. Amazon publishes, I heard, 1 million books a month.
Wow.
1 million books a month go live on Amazon. So look at who you're competing against. So you just have to be realistic about it. I don't write for the money. I do work full-time, but it doesn't matter how much I work outside my house. Writing is a job to me, and I do take it just as seriously as I do the job I have to leave, get in my car and leave the house. So that's my take on it, because if you don't take it seriously, no one else is going to take it seriously for you. You can't write a book if you're not taking it seriously. I don't care if you're only writing a book 2 hours a week. If you're not serious about it, no one else is either. No one's going to be serious about it for you.
So Chrissy, you just write, and all of you just write what you want to write. You don't
Absolutely.
necessarily look at the,
I do,
you
but I
look
don't.
and say, people are buying a lot of books on this, or people
Yes.
seem to be
No.
interested.
If you're
Um,
passionate on it.
There are people who do that and make very good money at that. I could never write. Let's say I write romance, so I could never write, like, contemporary romance is really hot right now, and it really is. Just now stories.
Oh,
Guy meets girl,
period.
no villain, no, just like you went to the coffee shop and met a girl.
Okay.
I can't write straight contemporary romance. There's got to be a bad guy in there. There's got to be guns. There's got to be shooting. There's got to be people dying. It's just how it works for me. I don't care that it's hot. I can't write it. It's like.
And here's one of the tricky things about following the trends. In the publishing industry, it moves
18 months.
way too freaking fast. Unless
Yeah.
you're pushing out something every 8 weeks, do not write for trends, because there's no way you can keep up.
No.
The trend will change
Yeah.
within 2 to 3 months.
It used to be but even the traditional publishers, even traditional New York publishers now, are getting on the bandwagon of, oh my God, we can't have these authors with 1 book a year. It doesn't sell books. Because you used to be able to do that, and that was fine, and everybody was fat, dumb, and happy, and made lots of money. Now, even the traditional publishers are putting books out every 4 to 5 months, 4, 5, 6 months at the most, for big name authors who you used to only see 1 or 2 books a year. They're learning, you can't keep up with the self-publishing. So the trends used to have 18 months on a trend. So there'd be a bell curve on the trends, and you'd hit, like, let's say paranormal romance was extremely popular 2 or 3 years ago. Now publishers aren't buying it. However, readers are still buying it, so the people that I know that are doing well in it are all self-published. Because publishers won't look at a paranormal wolf story. They're like, no, God, we have too many wolves. But readers still say, give me more wolves. So that's a trend that if you're walking into romance and you happen to write paranormal romance and you happen to want to write wolf shifters, you probably could still make some money on it. But I can't write something that's not in here. It's got nothing to do with up here because I'm a horrific business person. But I really am, I'm horrible. But I have to write what I feel because there's no life in the story for me. If you made me write something, it's gonna be flat and horrific. If Chris said, Chrissy, I need you to write a Christian book, I'd be like, I'm out. I can't.
I don't want to do that.
So I mean, you just have to, you do need to be very aware. That's the main problem I see, or I should say my challenge. I hate social media, yet I live on Facebook. You have to be present. You can't be J.D. Salinger in a room writing a book. Readers really do care. Like 20 years ago, readers could not give a rat's patootie whose name is on that book. They're still going to buy it if they want. Now they do. You have to be present. You have to be available. They want to know you. They want to know that you walk your dogs. They want to know you like hazelnut coffee. They want to know that you're married and have 3 kids. They want to know stuff like that. And they want to know what you eat for lunch. It's so weird to me.
So do you market on the social media?
Absolutely, I live on
You
Facebook.
get on radio and stuff like that?
Oh, I would love to get on radio.
I actually did an internet radio interview,
Yeah.
which was a blast. I have no idea of anybody on the planet other than my mom. Never heard it, but I had a good time doing it. But yeah, I mean, Facebook, Twitter,
Instagram is big.
You'll
whatever.
find actually that on a lot of really the big traditional publishers in New York, there used to be 6, now there's 4. It's in their contract, who are required to have a social media presence, you are required to participate in blog tours, you are required to post free snippets for your
If they
newsletter,
do
of
anything
which
for you.
they will not cover any of that cost, you
Right.
are responsible for it, it is in their contract.
They also don't, a lot of people think this, so they don't buy you nothing, okay? So if you want all those little freebies that you give away to your readers, notebooks, I do so much crap. Band-Aids, they don't buy you any of that. Now, my publisher is very nice and they give me designs for things. So every time I have a book come out, they will give me a design, like a bookmark design and a postcard design that has like, the 25-word thing that they make you write, which is horrific. Try to put 100,000 words on it into 25 words. Good luck. Tagline, they give me stuff like that. So I can go out and say, oh, I would like to order 500 postcards from Vistaprint, and they give me the design. But there's a lot of publishers who don't do that for you, even if you're Big 6 published, Big 4 published, whatever. So you need to look around when you're shopping around or trying to decide what route you want to go. Just realize there is going to be costs involved, and readers like free crap. So, but it depends on what the free crap is, because some of it don't bother.
So how do you self-publish? How do you go about doing that?
I think all of us do it differently. I'll be very brief, because I don't do it, I don't have time in my life to go to every single vendor in life and say, hey, here's my book, sell it for me. So I use what's called an ebook distributor, because I don't care to do that, and I don't want to know the numbers, and I don't want to stress about things. So I pay them $50 a title. They're called Inscribed Digital. If anybody wants specifics on them, you can welcome to email me. And they get 15% of my royalties. And if I can give a publisher 60% of my royalties, I can give an ebook distributor 15%. And what they do is they maintain all those things. So I send them the book. You do have to get it formatted. You do have to have your cover. You do have to have it ready for publication. But I send them, I learned how to format it myself, so I could not spend money on that because it's dumb. So it just was a waste of money to me. So I taught myself how to do it. I send them the book in the Kindle format, and then everybody in life except Amazon uses what's called an EPUB file, because Amazon just had to be different. And then you send them the cover, and they do everything else. So they put it on Kobo, they put it on wherever they sell. They sell it at bookstores I've never even heard of, or e-venues that I've never even heard of. But mainly you want Amazon, Barnes & Noble for now anyways. and Kobo are the ones that you want.
Is it COBO?
KOBO.
KOBO.
Yeah.
Kobo is Canada's answer to Kindle, but actually my books sell really well on Kobo, so I don't know. I know that there's Kobo in America
It's
too.
got a really good international
Yeah,
presence.
really good international presence. Amazon's pretty much still your cash cow for the most part. Barnes & Noble, they're gonna eliminate, they're starting to eliminate apps. I really do see that the Nook is gonna go away very soon. It's unfortunate. I have 581 books on my Nook, and I'm not looking forward to losing them. That's thousands and thousands of dollars. But, stuff like that. There's also Apple iBooks is really getting much larger than they were before. So you wanna make sure you're definitely on those 4. And then the ebook distributor that I uses Overdrive, something that's called Overdrive, which will get you into the libraries. And they also partner with allromance.com. So for my genre, that's really good. You want to be on allromance.com. That's how I self-publish. For me, it's no must, no bust self-publishing. And I do my own print as well.
Okay.
So I've published through 3 channels. CreateSpace for my paperbacks, Kindle Direct for my ebooks, and then audible.com for my audiobooks. With my first book, I did Nook as well, but quite honestly, I didn't sell enough to justify the pain. So I go exclusively with the Amazon world. But yeah, I'm self-published, so I do all the formatting myself. I do all the cover art, everything myself. I will hire somebody to do the actual graphics portion of it, but I'll put it all together and work it that way.
Do you do your own reading? Do you read your
No, I don't. I have a guy in Houston that does the actual voice work, and I split the royalties with him, so it works out really well.
Why do you do that?
Because he's a whole heck of a lot better at it than I am.
Really?
I'm awful at it.
Is this ACS?
Yeah.
No,
ACX.
do you mean why do you split royalties?
Yeah, it's
That was your
now-
question
I
was?
wonder why he didn't.
Oh,
You read it.
Seems
No,
to have a
so-
good voice.
Well, I will read the acknowledgements and the afterward portion. But
That's cool.
yeah,
You read it with
and he'll
drama.
clean it all up and he'll edit it, and edit all the noise and all the weirdness and stuff like that. But no, the guy's really good at it, and it's a split royalty thing, so it really doesn't cost me anything to do. And I tell you, it's really a very different experience to listen to a book than to
Yeah.
read a book.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the coolest experiences that I've had as an author was actually listening to the chapters as he would send them to me to proof them. And I would literally, in all 3 of my books, I got into it and I'm like listening to him. Would you send me the next chapter? I didn't know what's going on. And it's like, dude, you wrote the book. Yeah, but it's so different when you're reading it, you know?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I would literally just be so enthralled with the story that I would forget that I
You're
really.
supposed to listen and see if there's problems.
I know. But no, so I go through those 3 routes and I do everything myself, and it's, the first book, it seemed like really a lot of work. My 3rd book, it just went like that. I mean,
You didn't have to
it just-
learn it.
I know, I mean, it was like, I did the formatting and everything in a freaking week.
That's good.
As opposed to 6 months. The first one was forever, because I would do it, I'd submit it, and it would come back and go, that's not what I submitted, how is that?
You know what, though,
Overlap.
it's good that they do that, though, instead of just
It
saying,
is.
okay, you sent this to us, and, the words are backwards, but
Yeah,
that's okay.
But that's okay, when
Here's
it's
your
ready,
book.
here's your book. No, they've got great online tools, they've got a great process.
Talk to you on the phone.
And they will talk to you.
Yes,
And
they
they
will
will,
talk to you on the
yeah.
phone.
You can call, talk to a real person, and they'll help you through some difficulty through the formatting process or whatever.
Amazon may be the evil empire, but they've got their stuff together.
Oh, they're gonna own the world pretty soon.
They will own the world.
Probably
They
so.
totally will.
Google and Amazon.
Yes, I was just
There'll
gonna
be
say,
nothing
they're
left other than those 2.
Are you-
One of them will buy the other.
And I was gonna say on Amazon, in my case, the Kindle Direct and then the CreateSpace for the paperbacks, it's a 70% payout, so you're only
Yeah.
taking 30%.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that most of your traditional publishers, for ebooks, your royalties are gonna
40.
be anywhere between 35 and 40%, and
Yeah.
your paperbacks are going to be at
10%.
least 7%.
Yeah.
My paperbacks through my publisher are 10%, which I know is high for industry standards.
Which is one of the, goes
Yeah,
back to one of the beautiful things about self-publishing
Is-
is I actually, while I sell decent on Amazon, I sell more books at.
And hand-to-hand, yeah.
Hand-to-hand
Yeah.
at book signings than I do anywhere else. And I make a ton of money off those books because
You pay costs.
I pay costs, and then I sell them for the same price that Amazon sells them for. So I get that whole difference, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and that's the same, that's the thing, is just realize that really the money that you will make from writing, if you make money from writing, is not gonna be on paperbacks. It's really not. They say that there's 50, it's still 50, but let's see, let's talk about real numbers. I got $3.06 from CreateSpace for the last quarter. And that was my biggest check from paperbacks.
On Amazon,
Yeah, on
I probably
Amazon,
sell,
yeah.
I probably sell at least
Paperback.
4 to 1 ebook versus paperback.
Yeah,
Right.
and then my Ingram Spark, I stopped using CreateSpace because in my opinion, Ingram Spark, which is LSI Lightning Source, who everybody uses to print their books, Ingram Spark is kind of the CreateSpace version of that for LSI. I personally think they make prettier books, so that's who I use to print my books, and I made $1.22 last quarter. So you just have to realize you're not gonna make that much on paperbacks. Hand-to-hand sales, of course, there's much more profit, because I only paid a smaller fee to print it, then I always have stock on hand, that's my. How do you self-publish?
I'm a techno guy. I mean, so all the formatting and stuff, was fairly natural for me. That was actually one of the easier parts of the process. The most important thing, you got to know what you can do. I can do the formatting, but the covers, the artwork, vitally important. If you look at the really bad self-published stuff, horrible artwork, and it's going to cost you money to do that. Personally, for that cover, you can see the one with the hands.
I thought that was pretty cool.
I used a company called 99, or it's a website called 99 Designs, and you open a contest, and they have, they have thousands and thousands of graphic artists, and they do other things, but who basically compete for your business. You go through like a 2-week process where they send in samples. And so most of them are just horrible. You kind of tell them roughly what you want, and they send in stuff. Most of it's horrible, and you kind of pick your finalists, and then you go through a 2-week process of working directly with them. And you take the ones that you like, and you say, well, I love this, but not this. And most of them worked with me. I got it down to 2 finalists, but that one was, by far what I thought the best. And that was around $300 to run that contest. That's not a bad cost. To get a professional cover, it's going to cost you anywhere from there to $500.
Or more than that, more than that.
It can cost a lot more. It
More
can
than
cost a
that.
lot more than that.
I have custom art on mine, I don't know if you can see them over there on the top. So those are $650, because what I tell her is what I want, and she draws it on my fantasy series. Then for the ones that are on the bottom of the rack, that's custom photography. So those are more expensive as well, because what I wanted didn't exist in stock photos. So I actually hired a photographer, she took the photograph, told her what girl I wanted, she let me look at portfolios. And then you can get into very, very expensive things for covers, and you want to watch how much you spend because you don't know how the book's going to do.
Those
So-
are photographs?
The bottom ones, yeah, the bottom ones, yeah. So you have to watch what you spend because you're not gonna get your return on it. I will just tell you, I don't know about everybody else, but my average cost before a book ever goes live is about $1,200.
Mine too.
So that's for my editing, the cover, the distribution fees. So you do have to know that when you're walking in, and it's not all at once, of course, it's not all, you're not gonna spend it all up front. But you do need to be realistic when you're walking in, and you don't wanna spend too much. If you're not sure how much is too much, ask somebody who's got a couple books out, because some people will tell me what they spend on editing and I about fall over, and I'm like, why would you pay somebody that? That's outrageous. So one of my friends told me she spent $2,200 on edits. No, that's ridiculous. So you need to also cultivate, and if you're looking for a freelance editor, people always want editors who used to work for publishers, that equals dollar signs. There's a lot of freelance editors out there that are not $80 million, and will do a good job with your book. So, and one of the cool things about Chris's process for his covers, we all got to vote on it.
Well, that was cool.
So that was awesome.
He looked at the top 5 from that website,
Yes.
and he sent it out to the group, and he goes, okay, these are my top 5 picks, everybody pick pick
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
favorite one.
Mhm.
That was cool.
Yeah.
It's a good
That's really
site,
neat.
and for me, I had no idea. I mean, the book is a bit weird, so I had no idea what my cover. I had a rough idea, and everybody who tried to give me what I wanted, I hated. You know, because I kind of rap for rough
That happens
thing.
to me too.
But it was a great way of getting input from a bunch of different people.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that wasn't even on my radar, that particular thing. If you have a
It's
better
really cool.
idea of what you want your artwork, then I would probably suggest finding an artist who has work that you like, and go directly through them.
You can get a good cover, I would say a good cover from, I know lots of artists, for $150. You don't have to spend millions of bucks, but you need to realize that, even less than that, you need to realize that stock photos, at least in the romance world, I can't speak to the rest of the world, stock photos, a lot of authors, you see the same pictures on a whole bunches of covers, and you don't want that. So it depends on what you are looking for, but I will say that whoever said don't judge a book by its cover, it's lies.
Yeah.
Completely lies. Lies, Joe. Joe said that.
It is
You
live.
want to know if we were all crazy.
Yeah.
I assure you we're all crazy.
Yes.
It looks that, but we are all.
Yeah, we are all crazy. Because people do judge books by covers.
You could do what I did. I have a fairly nice camera.
Yes.
I took the picture,
I can't
On the
believe that,
cover.
actually.
I designed it, those are my boots and my legs and
Did
my
you do the
feet.
typesetting on that?
I did the typesetting.
See,
That's
that,
really-
and that's
that's really
amazing to
good.
me because seeing
Yeah.
that cover doesn't look like that to
Yeah,
me.
that looks very
It
professional.
looks
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I was so naive, I
Paid
didn't know any
somebody.
better.
yeah.
But it worked
If
out.
you've got a talent, then,
Yeah, if
then
you've got a
that's
talent
great.
to do it. Yeah, if you know how to do your, I know a lot of authors who know how to do their own covers. That is beyond me.
I met a woman who was at a conference just a few weeks ago she used watercolors and she did her own cover. And she had it traditionally published and she showed them that and they go, we're using that. You
That's
know,
awesome.
they loved the cover. So if you got the talent, use it, but most of us
Yeah.
don't. And we're not really a good judge of what's
No,
good
no.
anyway until we see it.
I don't ever
Hey,
see
Chris,
me
I wanted
getting
to
to
ask
that
you,
point.
Sure.
How is it to, because you do, you're in the religious world,
Right.
so what is that experience like? I know a lot of people that, a lot of preachers write books and.
It's kind of frustrating.
Is it?
I will say they're very strict about the rules, especially with fiction. Now, not a lot of them do fiction, but there's obviously strict content rules. It's kind of like the genre is ruled by the people who are offended the easiest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
So,
totally agree with that.
and that's one of the reasons that, that there's expectations with every genre. You write a romance, the two characters have to be together at the end. That's just a
For the
rule.
most part.
You write a Christian book, it's like they need to be, your character needs to be right with God at the end. And there are a lot of things like that. I thought that was a little restrictive for what I wanted to do. So my book won't be ever sold in a Lifeway or something. So that's just something you have to be cognizant of. If you're going to write in the Christian genre, you've got some very strict rules to follow, and the publishers won't even look at you. And I was talking with a small Christian publisher. They go, we can't do this, even though they don't sell through Lifeway or anything like that. And they're like, we want to be we want to be viewed as the right type of as putting out the right type of stuff that's consistent with the ACA, I think is what they call it. So, and I don't have good news for writing Christian stuff that doesn't meet that, because there's not real that people have tried to make a market for that, but it really doesn't exist right now.
And I think there's a lot of judginess on the reviews and stuff. If that really was a genre, I think they'd be so judgy, so much judgy.
Yeah, it's a difficult spot, which is why I decided I'm going completely in another direction. I'm always going to touch on theological, religious things, but I'm doing in anything I write from now on, it's not going to be so directly that way, but it's going to be more of a, I'll put my thoughts in it, but I'm not gonna be preachy, I'm not gonna, you know, it's just gonna be a part of this world and, you know, take it or leave it,
That's one of
so.
the things I really loved when Chris joined the group and I got to read that story because it was so different.
It's very different.
And I was adamant that he somehow get that sucker out there, but at the same time, I knew that based on how he wrote it and the way a lot of the Christian publishers were, there's no way that they would really get out of their own rules and actually take a chance on it. And I was like, at the very least, you have to self-publish it at some point, because it really spoke to me, and it wasn't in a preachy way.
Right.
It took the entire topic from a completely different perspective. I loved it.
And it should be a movie.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So get on that.
The difficulty has been finding my audience.
Yes,
And I
that is
think,
the hardest part.
and traditional or self-published, that you're gonna find, traditional publishing isn't going to help you with this. It may help you with some visibility issues at first, but you've got to do the work, and it comes down to finding, you know, it's, I was reading about this today, but it's kind of the difference between marketing and you know, is a marketer, or is it good writing that does it? What's going, you're marketing because you want to find those people who are going to love your book, and who are going to, by word of mouth, spread, you know, kind of spread word. You know, your dream person is somebody who says, "Oh my gosh, this book changed my life. I want everybody I know to read this." You know, finding people like that, but they got to know you exist, and so you have to market. You got to find ways to get the word out. And then once you do that, you've got to cultivate those people who really like you, and kind of keep them, you know, involved, so that they will be your cheerleaders. And
say, where's my next book?
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to do. It's if you get into a traditional genre, you get in romance, you get in science fiction, you have a set of people who like that stuff, and so you kind of got your starting is set. So, you know, I don't know why I can't think of the words right now. But yeah, it's like you're set. You've got a place to start.
Yeah.
And your competition's going to be high, but at least you know where to go. That book, unfortunately, it's like a lot of the people I think would like it are turned off by the science fiction elements. A lot of the people who like science fiction, it's not science fiction-y enough, you know, maybe they're kind of turned off by what they think. You know, my comment at this writers group, an atheist came up to me, and my main character's atheist, and she's like, "Yeah, he becomes a Christian in the end, doesn't he?" You know, it's like these, I'm like, well, maybe you should read the book, you know. I was like, maybe you should read the book, you might be surprised. Not wanting to give spoilers out, but, you know, it's hard to find your audience, so, you count on that.
You should know.
Yeah, okay, so how do you balance, I'll call it a job, because as y'all said, there's not money, or not a lot of it. So obviously there's got to be a job, or y'all did really well with stock.
You're independently wealthy.
So you've got a job, you've got writing, and you've got marketing.
And you got
Oh, yeah.
family.
And you
And
got
you
have real life.
bingo,
Oh, yeah.
And,
bingo.
For me, I don't know, for 11 years I worked 60 hours a week, and I worked 2 jobs, and I had 7 books come out. So for me, it's not, it's always been I want it, so I'm gonna do it. My husband always says about me, she said she could, so she did. So now I'm in a very lucky position because I have now changed jobs and I work overnight. So, and my job doesn't care if I do this at my job. So I personally am in a good position now because I write and edit when I'm at work. I work at a shelter for teenagers, and if my kids are sleeping, I'm kosher. Sometimes they're not sleeping, sometimes I have police calling, sometimes I have CPS calling. You just have to play it by ear. But for me, the drive has always been what kept me going. It didn't matter that I worked 60 hours a week. I worked 60 hours a week and I wrote. And I wrote when I got home from work at 5 o'clock, my ass got in the chair. I wrote from 6 to 8, fed myself, wrote from 6 to 8, and then spent about an hour with my husband because he also works nights. That's how I did it for years, because I had to do it that way. If you want it, it's going to be hard, but you need to do it. When people tell me about, it's not that everybody's life is different, so everybody has different life experiences and you deal with it differently, but I don't have time doesn't work for me because I want this. I want this more than I've wanted anything else in life. I have 11 books out. I'm about to have the 12th one out. So I make time. But it is balance. You do have to learn how to balance.
For me,
And so that's, I mean, it's hard.
my husband and I are both empty nesters. He has his hobby, I have mine, writing. I write, he's a triathlete, so I write when he's biking, running, or swimming.
Yeah.
And then we come together at the end of the day and get our together time. So, yeah, you find time for what you want to do.
Well, yeah, I do think it comes down to having a passion about the writing aspect, or having a passion about telling the story, or, you know, or the themes around the story, or whatever it happens to be. I've got a unique situation because I travel a lot in my job. So I have a ton of airplane time, airport gate time, hotel time, in weird cities by myself time. And, you know, you can only watch so much TV in a hotel. So I have developed the ability to put on my headphones in a massively crowded airplane or airport and just, you know, write. And so that helps out. But at the end of the day, you know, you've got to have that desire or that passion to tell that story, because even under the best of circumstances for me, it's a 12 to 15 month process from the time I go, oh, let me think about that idea, to the time I'm like going, oh look, I got my proof back. And anything that takes 15 months to do, you've got to have a level of dedication that's a little psycho.
That's true.
There you go. Back to your earlier point, you've got to be a little crazy to go, yeah, word number 1, and I know I'm going to write 80,000
80,000
more.
more.